All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I know typically we have been using a different platform for this. We've been jumping back and forth to find one that works with us. We had some technical issues with the last one, so we're giving this a go. And, please let us know if it's working or not working for you. So it's been quite some time since we had one of these updates because 2 weeks ago was July 4th, or right around July 4th. So for folks in the US, which is the majority of our team, we're on holiday. So a lot has been happening over the last month or so. The biggest push is on the desktop build, which is going to be the 2.2.2. And there are quite a few new features and things that are going to be added into that release. And while we've been working on 2.2.2, we've also been working on some pretty major architectural changes to the wallet that will be coming out hopefully not too long after in a major 2.3 update. So I'll talk about each of those. So, and then that's on the desktop app. There's also been work on both the mobile app and on the web version of the app. I'll touch on those as well. So, major things included in 2.2.2 is going to have some significant improvements to the cryptocurrency listings. So right now, with the cryptocurrency listings, you are adding, or you have to be able to sell at market price. There's no other options. In the new release, you'll be able to both add markups and add discounts as well. So if you want to sell above or below market price, you're able to do that. We're also going to be integrating the coin market cap API. So right now, I don't remember off the top of my head, there's like something like 50 cryptocurrencies that you can sell on OpenBazaar. But once coin market cap is integrated, that should go up to like 1,500 or something like that. So there's going to be a lot more optionality to be able to do that. There's also going to be new sort of a button on listings that you're viewing that allows you to click it, and it's called View on Web. And when you click that link, it's going to take you to the OpenBazaar.com version of the listing or the store that you're looking at. So it'll be an easy way to make sure that you're able to share links on the web instead of being forced to use the OB link that you need to use now. And actually, the OpenBazaar.com website is already live and out there for everyone to use now. You don't have to wait for this release to come out to start doing that. It's just the link integration comes out with the new release. There's a few other 2.2.2 things happening. There was a significant IPFS rebase that occurred, and I don't know, Mike, are there any new features or anything involved with this IPFS rebase that is worth mentioning?
So there's nothing particularly notable. We basically are bringing our IPFS code to the latest release offered by Protocol Labs. There are a few changes in the addressing that this will prepare us for, but these are technical details that really aren't going to give the user any benefit or need for concern.
Gotcha. And I know there's been talk of, as IPFS gets more advanced, they're starting to include things like, or the ability to do things like PubSub and some different features. And I know each time we rebase it, getting it up to date, it's like, oh, now we might be able to do this or might be able to do that. So, hopefully moving forward, as IPFS grows, we'll be able to build some more functionality on top of it that didn't exist earlier on in the project. Is there any other? I know in 2.2.2 that there are some improvements to the opt-in analytics. So that was put out in the last major release, and we now have, I don't know, it's, I guess, just over a month or so stats from that, which has been really great to look at and try to learn some stuff from. But we learned a few new events that we wanted to add that weren't in there. A few tweaks we wanted to make. I think Countly themselves, which is the service we use for stats, also put out an update. So there's a few things we're tweaking with that as well. So anyone on the call, is there anything else in 2.2.2 release that is notable that I have not yet mentioned?
Ethereum smart contracts and that work with the wallet.
Well, that goes out in 2.2.2. I actually didn't know that. Is that?
No, it's not in 2.2.
Oh, no. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that's something I want to talk about too. But no, that's not coming out in 2.2.2. I wanted to wrap that up before we moved on to the other stuff that's happening. Yeah, there's nothing else there. That right now is basically on the cusp of a release candidate. In fact, I think we hope to have one today. If not today, then by the end of the week, certainly, to be able to test over the weekend and hopefully early next week, the 2.2.2 comes out. So that's one, that's a lot of what we've been working on there. And then there are, as Mike alluded to, there's some major work being done on the next release already, which has some pretty significant changes in it. And the primary one of those is changes to the wallet, how the wallet works. And we are going to be switching from the current architecture, which was basically built originally to just be there for Bitcoin. And then because we had the Bitcoin fee emergency last fall, we sort of jammed in a couple other cryptocurrencies early this year. And it forces people to basically pick a single currency and just stick to that currency. And no one can buy anything from them unless they use that currency, and it's not ideal. So we have been working on an architecture to allow people to use multiple coins. And instead of using SPVs or full nodes, which are the only options right now, it's going to be an API basis. So you don't need to really host any part of the blockchain locally. It communicates with servers via an API, and you should be able to, or you will be able to, have multiple coins all in the sort of the same convenient wallet interface. So we've been working on that for quite some time. It's pretty difficult, big architecture change to do, but that's the next major feature that's coming out. Do we have a sense yet, Mike or Chris, for which coins are going to be supported right off the bat? Do we already know that?
I think the focus is to get the coins that we already have supported. So you can expect Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, almost certainly. I don't know what the situation is with Zcash, but I believe Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash are going to be pretty feasible from the get-go.
Yeah, and Litecoin will be in there, and Ethereum's up in the air. It depends on if that can make it into the next release or not, because it's a lot bigger of a challenge to integrate Ethereum than the other ones.
Right.
But if Ethereum's not in that one, then maybe a future release.
Yeah. Okay. So as I understand it, by default, we are going to be hitting Insight servers, and they have to be supporting the coin types that we're using. And I think the ones that we just talked about are, but it's sort of, I guess, up in the air as to how many other types they support down the road, and whether or not they're sort of going to be defaults or something that people will be able to kind of add in themselves later on. But as was mentioned, Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash sounds like Litecoin. And then Ethereum is a whole other ball of wax. That there's been a lot of work going on for that as well. And there's a couple different aspects to the Ethereum work. One is making the Ethereum wallet work. That's just the first step. So to be able to do transactions with Ethereum, buy and sell stuff. And that's been underway for a while now. And as Chris points out, don't know if that's going to actually be in 2.3 or not. But, it's being worked on. And then there's also some other smart contracts being built that are necessary to provide some of the functionality that is needed for the trade flow, such as moderator functions and that type of thing. And those are also underway as well. I'm not sure if they'll make 2.3. And then while the Ethereum integration work is sort of happening for payments, there's further groundwork. I'm not sure how far the actual coding's gotten for making sure that we can manipulate and use Ethereum tokens within the client, because that's the eventual goal for the OpenBazaar token, is to be able to do that kind of stuff in the client. So trying to build that functionality in now, and that is not something that's going to be in 2.3. That's a longer term thing.
So related to that, we do have a question from Chris Troutner. When you talk about the 2.3.0 release and Ethereum, can you touch on ERC20 tokens and how that would work both in present and in future? How would a person go about in the future adding their ERC20 token to OB? And still sounds like that's a TBD, right?
Yeah, I mean, the high level stuff I just talked through, but Chris or Mike or anyone else on the call, if you know of any more specifics on how the token stuff is going to work, please jump in.
I don't know how the OpenBazaar token will work, but if someone wants to add another like ERC20 token, it would probably be the same. It would probably be similar code to what is already there for Ethereum. I'm not sure how much different the actual code would need to be, but we're going to have like a plugin based system where you can someone who wants to integrate another coin like an ERC20 token could do it as a plugin, and probably a good amount of the existing Ethereum code could be reused for an ERC20 token, but I'm not sure how much of it. The plugin, last I heard, the Go plugin system doesn't work on Windows yet, so it might only be like Linux and Mac. But I think there is plans to support plugins on Windows at some point.
To flesh that out a little bit further, I suspect that we won't be able to support just any arbitrary token either. There will be some design work that needs to be done to allow each individual coin's quote-unquote definition to be trustlessly verifiable on the network, even for users that are not consuming the plugin that provides that particular coin's functionality. So there's a lot of design work that still has to happen. So for the time being, I think that the tokens that we'll be supporting will be limited to the ones that we can explicitly define inside of our releases, until we can come up with a design that will allow a more open definition to be distributed among users and shared without it having to be part of our release process. But that's something that I'm certainly thinking about myself, and will be pushing within the team.
Alrighty, thanks guys. so a couple other things. Oh, well, I guess the last main area that we have been working on over the past month is on the OpenBazaar.com site. So as I mentioned earlier, the .com is live now. And right now it's just a read-only version of being able to look into the OpenBazaar network by hitting up some gateways that we control. So it's a great way to browse. It's a great way to get links from within the network and viewable on the web, but you can't actually interact on the OpenBazaar.com yet. That is what we have been working on. And we've been building basically a bunch of small proof of concepts for the different tools that are needed to transition it from something that's read-only to something that has some interactivity. The first step is going to be buyer only. So the only thing you'll be able to do, other than the current, read-only looking at stuff, will be buying. And in order to do that, we sort of had to verify that a few things were actually possible. And that's what we've been building, for the past month or so. I think everyone on the call, except myself and Brian, have been building those sort of proof of concepts. So if you guys wanted to briefly describe what those are and what progress has looked like on those, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, I can take that one. Currently, we've built proof of concepts for generating keys and syncing data across various instances of a web app, which this is important because that's the first step in being able to create an identity that you can use for buying, and showing that that identity will stay in sync if you open it in two different browsers or open it on your phone and your desktop, without having a server involved, which is, that part's a little tricky. We will have a basic server that stores a backup of that data, which is how you get it onto a new machine. Though we've also explored other ways to transport your data. So theoretically, you could manually sync the data by exporting it and then importing it into a new computer. The next step is to build a proof of concept that shows we can generate all the data needed for a purchase, so that someone would be able to use the web to purchase a existing item from a OpenBazaar node that was generated with the desktop client. And that's where we're at currently.
All right, thank you, Josh. In looking at my notes, the only other thing that has sort of happened recently that I hadn't noted yet is just a small one. We had been Josh had been working to update to Electron 2.0. We had some Electron vulnerabilities in the last update that were patched, and 2.0 is out, so we were looking at doing that.
Which we will not be doing. Yeah,
I was just going to say, you figured out that there's some changes to like how local storage happens in the update.
Electron, basically 2.0 has some critical bugs that are live in production that mean we can't use it.
Yeah, so that work is just determining that doesn't work yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's everything significant that I had noted. So if there's anything that we had been working on from this team, go ahead and throw it out there. That hadn't been mentioned yet.
So I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but we have a bunch of infrastructure work that's going on in the background that will hopefully help us be a lot more responsive to challenges as they come up. I know that we had a bit of a search outage over the weekend, which we were able to respond to relatively quickly, and we'll be able to respond to even quicker in response to the outage that we had. I know one of the things that fell out of that would include kind of a better failing a failover system for when someone needs to be alerted of things happening and the primary contact is not available. So getting better processes and procedures around handling those things will hopefully allow for better uptime and better availability for our auxiliary services.
We have another question sitting here. This is definitely kind of an ongoing one that we've addressed in a couple places, but not really structurally formally. I think it's probably time for an official blog post about this. But thoughts on Lightning integration for OpenBazaar? Anyone, go.
Yeah, so we have different team members who, as Jen said, have sort of talked about this, but not, I guess we don't have a coherent response yet. The current architecture, Chris, if I'm wrong here, jump in and tell me. Current architecture is, there's some sort of fundamental things about the way the Lightning Network works and the way that IPFS and thus OpenBazaar work that aren't really compatible at the moment. Mostly around being offline for receiving messages and payments and that kind of thing. Because we're on IPFS, you can go offline and yet still engage in trade. And my understanding right now of the Lightning Network is that is not sort of how it works by default. I do know that Washington specifically has stated that he thinks that there are sort of ways around that and things that can be built to get around that restriction. But
the only way around that is you only allow direct online payments in the Lightning Network. That's it. Vendor has to remain online, and it has to be reachable.
So perhaps Washington's proposing that we do integration, but just multi-sig is not going to be viable, or offline payments. I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, and at this point too, I'd also point out that to set up a Lightning node takes like a day and a half of syncing and running your own full node, and I mean that's basically you'd have to do all that manually, all that manual command line setup. Just to hook it into OpenBazaar essentially. So I don't know if it's I really don't think it's like anywhere close to like usable from like a friendly consumer perspective. It would only be like people who want to run full nodes from the command line type deal.
Yeah, and I mean you make some good points around the user experience too, about being online and stuff. I mean obviously multi-sig is out because it's just not even, I don't even think that's possible right now, or it's at least theoretical at best. But, I mean, I think, and one other concern you didn't bring up is that the max amount you can actually send on Lightning is pretty low too. So now you have to restrict how much people can actually sell, on the platform as well. So, is this going to be tuned towards like microtransactions or something like that? I don't know. It's like probably a broader discussion, but probably a ways out.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to summarize our answer, though we don't have a formal post on it. It's still fairly early. It is, still beta. It still has restrictions on size. It still has a lot of usability issues with it. And so I think it's something that's kind of like we're watching it as it grows to see if it's something that will eventually work for us. But for right now, I think it doesn't yet.
There was another question about PubSub. I mean, there's some interesting things they kind of hope to do with that. One that, I don't know, maybe we'll see if we can't get it in 2.3 is IPNS records using PubSub. So this isn't like fully, I wouldn't say like completely fully implemented. It's like partially implemented in IPFS, but I mean, we could make our own resolver if we had to fully implement it. But the basic idea is like currently anytime you do an IPNS resolve, it does this DHT crawl to give you back the data, and this can kind of be slow at times. So with the IPNS, it's the first time you start up and you do a resolve, it has to obviously do it through the DHT to get the value and return it to you. But then subsequently, it will subscribe in the PubSub. It will subscribe to that person's peer ID, and they'll receive push updates anytime the ID or the key value pair updates. So what that means is all subsequent resolves after that can be, they can basically return instantly. We can just return like the last value we have in the cache. So it'll return instantly, and it'll be the most up-to-date record that's available since it's subscribing over PubSub. So that's a nice little feature to have. The only issue is the way I know a lot of users use the app is like they shut it down, they start it up, they shut it down, they start it up. So we still might be hitting the DHT for that initial IPNS query, but all subsequent ones should be really fast. So that is something that I'd like to get in there. We do have this other like use cache mechanism that can maybe be combined with the IPNS. So maybe the first query, depending on the context, the first query might pull from the cache instead of from the DHT. And so I think we can speed up the IPNS somewhat depending on the situation. So that's hopeful. There's also I want to use PubSub to kind of better share data with other nodes. So right now we have these like kind of hard-coded push nodes. I mean, they're hard-coded in the config file. You can change it if you really want to. But it pushes data to other nodes for sharing it. And it's primarily just our OB1 node. So I'd like to make it so this is done over PubSub. So like anyone who wants to change the data can just subscribe. What's Jen saying? So anyone who wants to subscribe can subscribe to this data and reseed it for other people. Also playing kind of a little bit with the idea of having followers subscribe to the people they're following, and possibly reseed the data of your followers too. That can be used over PubSub. So maybe like the following system can have a little bit more usefulness rather than just simply, like a list in the UI that doesn't really do anything. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Chris. I don't see any other questions out there. So I kind of already talked about where we're going moving forward based on where we've already been. But just to reiterate, the release candidate for 2.2.2 will be coming out, I think, today or tomorrow. Hopefully test over the weekend, and then early to mid next week, the release will come out. I don't think we have a specific timetable for 2.3, but a significant amount of the work for that has been done in parallel with the current release, next release stuff. So hopefully not too long after. And the mobile stuff continues moving along. I know there's talks about the beta testing group sort of being formed. I don't think we have any specific timelines there either, and same on the .com. So other than the next immediate release, those timelines are still just sort of TBD. But as always, if anyone wants to contribute or ask further questions about where we're at and what we're doing, please jump in the Slack. And if you're on this call, you probably already are there. But always happy to field questions from folks. So any other things to mention before this gets wrapped up? Sounds like no. So thank you everyone for joining. Thanks everyone for listening. And we will see everyone again in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
All right. Yep. Bye, guys.